This week's group session it will be on when you should be committing to a comp or a line. And the big thing is that a lot of the time when you're playing a match and you buff for, most of the time it's your own fault that you buff for and not the game's fault, right? So like as you can see with like most top players who have like very, very high top four rates, a lot of the time, even those players when they bought four, it's often like there was some mistake that happened where you selected the wrong line or something else happened. So usually it's a result of either one, you have weak itemization or traits that cause your board to be weaker than other boards, especially in like a mirror matchup where you're say you're playing like Master Yi versus Master Yi, right? And you're in a mirror matchup. Sometimes they might just have a stronger augment than you, right? Like you both hit on roll down, you both have some units, but like they just have stronger items, so you lose that matchup, right? And so a lot of the time in TFT, the cause of bot foring is not due to RNG. So often when you're like, okay, I have to play this line because I'm given blah blah blah, often there is a better decision to be made in that moment. And so a lot of the causes of bot fours come from very specific results. And so the reason most top players bot four less than like lower rank players is mostly because they're able to conserve HP early game into having multiple different lines to select from later on in the game. And this HP conservation allows you to have a lot of more flexibility on your rolldowns. And so it's important to know exactly when to commit to your line, because if you choose to commit too early, you might limit your lines too much. And so by doing that, you're going to make it way harder for you to pivot out into a different line if you're contested too hard by the lobby. And if you commit too late, it often causes you to you flex between two lines, right? And so you hold units for one line, you hold units for the other line, and that splits your entire bench. So it's very, very hard to make upgrades when you're flexing two lines at the same time. So it's very, very important to decide when you're committing to selecting your line. In this group session, the main purpose of the session is to determine whether it's a good decision to commit to your line at a certain point. And so the big idea is that if you select to or make the decision to commit to a line at the proper point, it's more likely for you to top four that game. So as a general rule, when you look at lines, the most important thing is to remember what kind of comp each line you're considering has to roll down at, right? So if you're trying to play like say Cho'Gath roll, right? You have to remember that it's a 3-1 roll down, right? Any later than that, and the comp is already a lot worse of like especially in like a lot worse of a spot than you would normally be in. And so the comp will drop down a tier in strength basically because you're too late on a roll down. And so for instance, like a one cost is a 3-1 comp, right? And say if you're playing Samira Ornn, it's a 3-5 comp, right? So you want to follow the standard roll down timers of each comp. And especially when you're contested on a line, it's important to be rolling early on these timers, or you will probably go bot four. And this was like especially evident during the TX meta back in the day, where if you rolled before your opponent on hitting the Caitlyn 3 in last set, you would snowball the game out of control most of the time, because you will simply have a lot more money than your opponent. The more HP and abortion to have before your rolldown interval, you have time to decide whether this is exactly the line you want to commit to or not. After the rolldown time is done, you're no longer able to play that comp basically because you're gonna bleed out too much HP if you decide to commit at that moment. I'd say probably the only exception to this is like if you're on a win streak on like 3 cost roll, sometimes you can roll on 4-1 because you're very strong on level 6, and then you can like stall until level 7 and then roll down on level 7 on a good interval. But usually you're rolling down on 3-5, especially if your board is not that strong already. You want to stabilize on that interval. So the big thing when you're committing to a line is the itemization, right? So not every comp can use the same items, right? So like for example, DB is like a very core item in like scenario lines and corking lines, right? And it's like usable in like well, what's it called, Zaya? But usually a comp has a core item that is a requirement to make it playable, right? So like you basically will never play Samira if you don't have a DV because you're behind the most critical item in the comp, right? And then you're just gonna lack too much damage at that point if you were to commit to comp without DV, right? And so it's okay to not have every ideal item. So like for example, if in the past Quirky was going DV, Last Whisper, and Striker's Flow, right? But it's perfectly fine to have like DV Shojin Whisper or DV Last Whisper Giant Slayer, right? Like you don't need perfect items, you just want 1 or 2 items that are critical to the comp. The more important thing though on these stages is to have a 3-item tank. Because if you have a 3-item frontliner, even if you lose the round, you're most likely gonna kill some units because your frontline will hold up so long for you to do so. So having a 3-item tank is very punishing in terms of HP. Like if your frontline completely falls before your carry has time to ramp up, you're gonna take probably 15 player damage, right? On the like that turn. Whereas if you have a 3-item tank, you're more likely to kill like 6 units or even more, maybe. And then you'll probably take like 8 to 9 player damage, right? And so saving HP by having 3-item tank is very critical. The next thing you want to consider is the lobby composition, right? So when the lobby has a lot of people angling one line, it in return it makes a lot of the other lines that are not contested better, right? This is like very like one of the basics of like TFT is that like when a comp is contested, all the other comps are like a lot easier to play, right? So first you want to see like if you have a reroll slot, does someone else have like are they trying to play the same reroll comp as you? And if so, are they in a better spot than you? Because if you have a better spot than them, it's possible that you could push them off of the reroll comp. But the other option that you have is that if they decide to take like triple econ, right, and go deep into the reroll, it's often possible to just hit the units 2-star, and then you just tempo straight to 9 and play around 5 costs, right? So like if you're playing the Samir Orn board, right, and someone were to contest you on Samir Orn, it could be a good idea to just play to level 9. You can fit a bunch of the extra traits in, and you can even get Jin on the board maybe as your secondary carry instead of playing around Samira. And that's just like an example of like being flexible with the line you're playing, right? So like even if you're a contestant on a real comp, you can use it as tempo to reach a stable board later on. Basically, you want to like analyze your spot before you're committing to any of these lines, right? And it's important to note that even if someone is directly contesting a 4-cost, sometimes the 4-cost comps can grief for roll comps, right? So if there were 2 people in the lobby playing Nami, those are often 6 Orns out of the pool, right? So it's a lot harder to hit Orn 3 than before, right? Or say there's 2 quirky players in lobby, right? If you're playing Nar reroll via the tempo printer version, it's a lot harder to hit like Rammus 2, right? because these guys are contesting you, right? And also in return, it's harder to hit the NAR 2 because it's or NAR 3 because most likely they're going to be holding NARs, even like on stage 3, right? They're going to be holding NARs, and every NAR counts when you're playing that NAR 3 line, right? Like the early NARs you hit on your level 8 rolldown will matter for you for how fast you can print the NAR 3. So it's very, very important to identify these things and that like account for the fact that even a reroll comp can be griefed by a forecast comp, even if it's indirectly. It's also important to note how high tempo lobbies are, right? So say you're going into stage 3 with like 80 HP, right? 80 HP is like usually means you're like you lost early and then won a little bit, or like you missed street in the stage 2, right? So you want to identify, okay, if the lobby is super high tempo, which means like there's a lot of reroll players and they just roll down, or a lot of boards look strong, it often might be better for you to try to like roll a little bit of gold just so you can match the tempo of the lobby. Because HP matters. Having an HP lead allows you to actually pivot between comps pretty easily because that extra HP allows for the wiggle room that you might need. Sacking stage 3 often is about 40 HP lost, whereas if you win even 2 rounds, it's only like 15 HP lost, and sometimes even less on stage 3. So it's very, very important to be conserving HP because that gives you time to account for like when you're deciding on your roll down, right? And you have to pick between the two comps. These 2 or 3 lives can be the extra time you need just to hit like a 2-star upgrade and stabilize. So HP is like very, very critical in deciding your line. So finally, like the final thing you should probably be looking for is how easy it is to actually pivot into the line you're playing, right? So like if you have a Primordial opener at the very start, it's very, very easy to play Master E because you already have all the units for the comp, right? You have the Bruiser frontline, you have an econ engine, you have the Marta package most likely. And so it becomes very, very trivial to pivot from Primordial into Yi. Whereas if you're playing like I don't know, like LeBlanc or some other comp, very, very similar, Zaya, maybe Corki. It's very, very hard to actually pivot from Primordial into those lines because you're not holding any of the units you need to play on the board because what's it called? You won't have them because you're playing your strongest board, right? And often you need to make econ on certain intervals, right? So like say on 3-6, you need to make 40 gold on level 7, right? So you have to sell like the I don't know Jack Funk Star that you're holding in case you were playing Xyle, right? And so now you have to find the Jacks again, which can be very detrimental to your game plan. Because if you don't hit that Jax on your level 8 roll down, you're completely boned, right? And then you might need to spend like 20 to 30 gold just for that one unit to spec your board. Whereas if you're playing Master Yi from this Primordial spot, you already have all the units on your board, so you can't ever miss, right? Your board will always have the units you need on it. So it's very, very important to identify that if the comp is very, very easy to transition to, it might be worth it to just play it, even if you're contested, because you have to think that the contesters are playing from scratch often, right? If they're playing from scratch, they're gonna run into the issue of trying to find like the little units that you need, like the Velvet, say, or like Akali for this comp. And so it's very, very important to be identifying these things and recognizing that how you want to commit to your line depends on how the lobby is doing in set lines. And so one of the things you can do when you have the extra HP is to do a half roll down, where if you roll to 20 to 30 gold instead of to 0, you can often roll the next turn, and because so many units are out of the pool, if you're uncontested on a line, you'll pretty much hit every upgrade at that point because so many 4 costs are out. In general, I'd say an average lobby has about 4 to 5 4-cost comps, and usually it'll be like 3 reroll comps, but sometimes it can be like less than that. Sometimes it can be more. It depends. Often a half roll down tech is very, very strong. It just requires that you have the HP to stack around in order to do your full roll down the turn after. So I'm gonna bring up some possible ways to transition to some comps. So for instance, say you're playing for the fast line Sona board, right? So often what you'll see people doing right now is they'll start with some Lysandra opener, right? So a common one will be they'll have Leona, they'll have Mord, and they'll have Zoe. So right here, right? So this is the standard AP opener, right? And so the best way that people approach this line is that they play for the 3 Shepherd early game opener, which is very, very strong on stage 2 and stage 3, because this extra frontliner means you have a lot more damage to work with. And additionally, it gives your team an AP when they cast. Often what you'll see happen is you'll slowly add in more traits onto the board with like Nifty and Alawi in for Fire on the board. And so often what happens is in the mid game, when aiming for like a fast 9 line, say, they'll play around 5 Shepherd, right? And so like example line will be like this, right? And you're playing around LeBlanc, or perhaps even Zoe, even, right? Just this will be like a standard level 7 board, and then you can add in a flex unit on the next level. So like you can add Morgana in, you can add what's it called, the Mighty Mech in, right? And so you just play this board until you're level 9 and slowly pivot into your Sona board, right? So you have Sona, you have Bard, and then like Blitzcrank, right? And you'll slot these guys in as you hit their upgrades. So say you don't have the HP, right? So like say you just lost a lot of stage 3, right? So what can you pivot into exactly? Well, there is a lot of lines that can use the Shepherd opener into like to play it from. One example will be the ASOL board, which involves ASOL, the Mighty Mac. Like a standard like Mac comp would include these units, right? And you're playing around the ASOL carry. So that's like one example of like, say your fast 9 is failing, right? So a line you can commit to is ASOL, right? Say ASOL is very, very contested right now. What lines can you play? Oh, you have to like basically look into what else is available. So mostly it'll be probably Karmanami. So it'll be this board, although it's not particularly good, and you'll often have like Nunu Alawi in this board. So like this example of another board you can pivot into, right? And it really depends on what the lobby is playing, what upgrades you're hitting, right? So if you hit your Mech 2-star, your Mighty Mech 2-star, you should probably play into the ASL line. If you hit like a Nunu 2-star, you can play into Karma. If you have the items, you can play into LeBlanc, although I don't particularly recommend LeBlanc without like a really strong Arbiter. And if you have the HP to do it, go for fast line, you can play into you can just play into like the Sono board with the 4 Vanguard board basically, right? Another board you can just play into is like the Vex board if you have the items for it. But it's basically like with this kind of AP opener, you actually have a lot of lines to play, and it's not just like, oh, I have to go fast line here. You have a lot of options in case the lobby is high rolling, in case you are low rolling, in case you need to roll here or you're gonna bleed out too much HP kind of thing. Where like you're not gonna win, so you have to just save HP kind of stuff. It's very important to identify like what is my like expected placement in this game, right? And then play accordingly, right? Like if you know that you can't win the lobby, you should be playing for as many placements as possible, basically, right? And so by having a lot of lines open, it allows you to identify um exactly how many people can contest you and like given a certain amount of context. And additionally, it can identify how likely am I going to hit if I roll playing a different line here. Another example, right? So as we were mentioning in the first example, it was then the Belveth Primordian opener. And example mid-game board would be around Akali Maokai, and say you can even have Jinx and I don't know, Jinx and Laoi, say for Anima. Okay. Like this could be your mid game board, and then you can transition into like 4 or 5 lines, right? So like say your Belveth had like I don't know, GS on it, right? GS and then like Kraken maybe, right? With GS Kraken, you can play into Xayah, you can play into Master Yi. So yeah, Yi, you have Xayah open, and potentially you even can play into Meatball, right? Even if you don't have the Gnar right now, like you can still play into like Corki, and maybe you can do a curry Gnar on the side, even though you don't have Gnar 3. Those are just some examples of lines you could be playing right here, right? A lot of the time, people struggle with this concept where once they hit this Primordial opener, right, they're immediately locked into like, okay, I'm just gonna play Master Yi to slam. So I'm gonna slam Edge Knight, I'm gonna slam Giant Slayer, I'm gonna slam Kraken, say, right? And when they look around the lobby and they'll see like 3 people are playing Master Yi, right? The big problem is that even if you hit Yi too, if the other people also hit, you you might just lose because they have a stronger board setup than you, right? And you might spend so much gold rolling on level 8 that other lobbies in the other comps in the lobby can outcap you. Solely because you spend so much gold on contesting a line. Whereas if you play Belveth or the Primordial opener into Xayah, say, right? Xayah will be fairly uncontested, and by doing so, you give your chance. You give a lot of opportunities for you to pivot, in case, like say other people high roll, right? Then you for sure want to play that. If other people low roll and then you watch them on like 4-1 roll down or something, right? And you watch them just completely miss, then you have the chance to just be like, okay, because everybody missed on the roll down, I can still play Yi, and I will hit because no one else hit, right? So yeah, I think the takeaway here is that it's important to keep lines open and options open in order to develop a stronger game plan and have a higher chance of top scoring.